So I found myself in a bit of a compromising position. I needed to use my chainsaw on my neighbor's tree, but all of my saws needed some sort of work. One of my good saws wasn't oiling correctly, my steel needed a bar and chain, while another one needed a carb. That meant I had to swallow my pride and borrow a chainsaw from a viewer, but it's been over a year since I fixed it, so hopefully they didn't ruin it in that time. In today's video, we look at this Poulan chainsaw, and the problem is that it wasn't correctly put away in storage, and now there's no guarantee that it's going to start and run correctly. If you didn't know it, when you put a chainsaw away, you need to take a few precautions, and if you don't, you might be in the same situation I'm in. Now, I'm going to try and repair this Poulan chainsaw, but yours might be a little different, so this might not work on yours. So if things don't work out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. The last time I saw this chainsaw, I had to go through it and service the entire fuel system because it was not put away properly and the fuel system was ruined by the fuel that was left in it. That means I had to replace the fuel lines, the metering diaphragm, and finally the purge bulb. Basically, the owner of this chainsaw just can't seem to remember to take the extra steps to ensure it's going to make it through its next time in storage. Now, to prove my point, if we check the fuel tank, more than likely there's going to be fuel in it, and it's probably going to be in bad condition as well. Now, there are two schools of thought when it comes to putting away two-stroke equipment. One is to leave fuel in it, and the other is to run the machine until it runs out of fuel. The problem is that I find the schedule for leaving fuel in your machine requires a lot more of your time to ensure it's going to last. That's why I recommend running it empty. As expected, there's still fuel in the tank. Now, I can't tell how old it is while it's still inside the tank, so the only way to find out is to pour it out for an inspection. The other way is to just try and start it and see what happens. So it didn't even try and start, which is not a good sign. It means we either have a compression issue, no spark, or we have a fuel issue. The easiest thing to check is the condition of the fuel in the tank. Now, after pouring it out, there's still some fuel in the lines and the carb, so to help get as much out as we can, I'm going to press the bulb several times and then pour the remainder out into the jar. If I had to guess, it looks like there's about 3 ounces of fuel in the tank and lines. That would mean that this was not ran dry before being put up. So there's nothing wrong with leaving fuel in the tank, but it means you're planning on starting the saw on a regular basis and replenishing the fuel when it runs out. This keeps fresh fuel in the system, but like I said, most people are not willing to keep up that sort of schedule. The next thing we need to do is to put some fresh mixed fuel into the tank, purge the air out of the lines, and then try starting it. Hopefully it starts, otherwise we'll have to do a lot more diagnostic work. Luckily, it started and ran just fine, and all we had to do was drain all of the old fuel out of the tank, lines, and carb. The only issue was that the idle speed was much too high, causing the chain to keep moving, which is obviously something we need to fix. Unfortunately, I didn't have any of my tools with me at the time to make the adjustments, otherwise I would have done them and made a test cut. Even if I had my tools with me, I still wouldn't have made a test cut, and the reason was because I hadn't checked if there was any oil in the tank at the time. Now, more than likely, I'll have to sharpen the chain as well because I don't think the owner has a way of sharpening it. The other reason why is because the chain is also loose. Now this is the way I picked it up, so the last time they were using it, they let the chain get loose and kept using it this way. Now I really can't say anything because I'm not a chainsaw expert, but I might have to ask them to read the owner's manual again before they use it the next time, and to be honest, I'm sure I should probably do the same thing as well. I'm really glad I didn't try and use the saw to cut any wood because the oil tank was empty. The reason it was empty is pretty clear. Most of the oil had leaked out of the saw and was in the hard case that the saw had come in. To keep this from happening again, when I give it back to them, I'm going to empty all the fluids. Now this time, I'm going to bring a small Phillips head screwdriver with me so I can adjust the idle speed, which will allow me to keep the chain from moving at idle. I'm also going to bring a carb adjustment tool as well. This will allow me to make any adjustments to the carb if the engine has some running issues. Now these differ between carbs, so yours might not be the same. If you need a set of these, there should be a link in the description. Although I didn't show it, I also adjusted the tension on the chain so it's safe to use now. I also did a light sharpening on the chain, which it definitely needed. Surprisingly, besides needing to adjust the idle speed to keep the chain from moving while off the trigger, it seems to be running and cutting just fine. Now I might have to sharpen the chain one more time or recommend a replacement, but it did make a decent cut. Now, I filmed this video a few weeks ago and have since used it on a small tree, and to be honest, it did quite well. I was very happy with the way it worked. Unless you're a professional and need a $1,000 chainsaw, this is just fine for the occasional cutting that a homeowner might need to make, so for $200, it just makes sense. So in the end, the year it spent with fuel in the system didn't seem to hurt this chainsaw at all, but I couldn't say the same if it was any longer than that. I would always recommend running your equipment until the fuel system was empty, but then again, it's your machine, so do whatever you want with it. So my question is, how do you put up your chainsaw, with or without fluids? Now, there's no wrong answer to this question, and to be honest, I've done it both ways. As long as you use some sort of fuel stabilizer, you can leave fuel in it. Just make sure you use the saw within a couple years, though. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.